Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Up next on Another View, a phenomenon that used to be thought of as almost a rite of passage growing up. Kids being teased, called names, being mean to each other. But it's much more serious than that. It's called bullying, and it causes mental, emotional, and academic stress. So much so that to some teens, the only way out is suicide. In this hour, we'll talk about bullying, what it is, how to recognize it, and most importantly, how to stop it. Stay tuned. Another View is next, right after this news from NPR.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Thank you so much for joining us on this Friday the 13th. I'd forgotten about that date, but I want to tell you before we start our show today about an event that a former guest of ours, actually, is holding tomorrow. DJ Manny Flasio is his name. And if you remember, about a year ago, we did a show about African-American males who had found themselves in trouble and had turned their lives around and started doing great things. And he is holding a Royalty Radio Come Together Day tomorrow, Saturday, May 14th at 11 a.m. at Bullied Park in Norfolk. And this is a day to help stop gun violence. And that is something we so very much need in the Hampton Roads area. So it's for kids and families. They're going to have activities and games for the kids like face painting and cupcake designing and lip syncing to music and just a grand time. So come on out tomorrow. It's supposed to be a nice day at the beginning of the day at least. Saturday, May 14th at Bullied Park in Norfolk. I want to read an excerpt from a letter written by then 13-year-old ZaKhari Waddy. He's an 8th grade student who cried out for help from bullying. He says, quote, "I want someone to do something about it because I'm tired of boys messing with me because of my skin. I'm at my boiling point with this, so please do something about this because whenever I bring it to the office principal, you do nothing about it, and I'm tired of the racism." Now, we're going to hear more about ZaKhari's story in just a moment. His mom, Zettrona Powell, joins us. Hello, Zettrona. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Great. So thank you so much for being with us. Along with Karen Eure Wilson, whose son was also bullied. Hi, Karen. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for joining us. Dr. Ernestine Duncan is chair with the Department of Psychology at Norfolk State University. Dr. Duncan, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And Jonathan Zur, who is a good old favorite now here on our program, been with us for a lot. He is president and CEO of the Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities, and they bring programs to schools to stop bullying. So I was in a meeting earlier this week, and I mentioned to someone that we were going to do a topic about bullying, and that person's response was, well, that was just something that happened, to all kids when we were growing up. Now they have a fancy name for it. Is that what it is, Jonathan? A fancy name?
Well, it used to be that it was sort of a rite of passage, kids being kids and that type of thing, and that doesn't make it right. It wasn't right then, and it certainly is not right now. But today what we're seeing is much more significance in terms of the consequences of bullying, the fact that students are taking their lives with greater frequency and self-harm and other consequences. And also it's much more wraparound in that it doesn't just happen during the school day and school hours. Because of cyberbullying, because of technology, it really does follow a student throughout their day, and that has much more significant consequences.
So before we get into exactly what bullying is and so forth, I want to talk to you, Zettrona, about tell us ZaKhari's story. What happened?
Well, we moved to the Tab area. We've been in York County for around 8 years. We moved to the Tab area around 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. So once we moved to the Tab area, it was different. It was in the neighborhood. A young lady came up to ZaKhari and asked him, did he want to rob her or did he want to rape her? This is the neighborhood. He's going around riding his scooter, going around door to door asking people, can he cut their grass? My son is a great kid. And when he came to me and told me this, it crushed me. And I went to the parents' house. to try to get an understanding of, like, how can your daughter even think she can open her mouth to speak to him like this? And they just slammed the door.
So they wouldn't even discuss it with you. So you, in your mind, or I'm asking the question, did you see this as both a bullying issue and a racial issue?
I seen it as a racial issue, not more so of bullying, because it was an isolated incident.
In terms of what happened in the neighborhood. So what happened to him in school?
Well, in school, ever since he was at Tab Middle School, he's been called the N-word. He's been pushed. He's been hit on the bus. And at the same time of him being pushed on the bus, been called negative words, brought it to the attention of the administrators. The boy was suspended for a couple of days. The incident that led him to writing the letter, he was on the school bus for the football team. They had an away game, and they were coming back to the school on the bus. And they passed, it was a man driving a truck, and he had a Confederate flag. And they passed it, and the young boy said, "Oh, yeah, well, ZaKhari wouldn't be able to come to my house." And so the other children on the bus was like, "Well, why couldn't he come to your house?" And then that's when he went into the whole story about ZaKhari's ancestors hung from a tree hundreds of years ago. So ZaKhari was upset because this was not the first incident of him being spoken to like that at that school. So he was upset. He brought it to other coaches' attention because when he got off the bus, he threw his book bag. And he told them what happened, but I never once got a phone call saying, "Hey, this happened on the school bus." ZaKhari was a little bit upset. He was told, "It's okay, don't worry about it. Don't let it get to you." How can you not let those words get to you? A child shouldn't have to hear that their ancestors, it's already in our history, but he shouldn't have to hear, it's 2000 and it was 15 then. So why are you still even, coming towards him with this?
Let me ask you this. Was ZaKhari in the minority? I don't know the makeup of the school system there. So I'm assuming from your conversation that he was very much in the minority.
Yes.
Is that right? We did reach out to the York County School Division and Tab Middle School. And I do have a statement that I want to read from them regarding this incident and their take on bullying as a whole. And it says, quote, "The York County School Division, Tab Middle School, and all of our schools consider student safety and security a top priority. Our school administrators and staff follow the division's Student Conduct Code, which does address both bullying and racial harassment. In addition, the division has a bullying prevention committee on which Mrs. Powell was invited to serve. This committee has met to review existing protocols and provide recommendations." So you were invited to participate. Did you participate?
I did not. I was invited. I got a phone call to participate, but I was not a part of it, nor did I hear what came out of the meeting. That statement says nothing at all to me. At all. My son, even after it got national attention, it got worse. It didn't get better.
The bullying got worse.
It got worse. A little girl was walking down the hallway singing a chant, 1, 2, 3, 4, look at that N at the door. Yeah. Pushing, shoving. I wouldn't say that they weren't doing anything, but it was not helping in the school.
Is he still in the same school now?
No, I took him and my daughter out of the school.
Okay, and moved them to another school. So, Jonathan, let me ask you again. Now, I'm coming to you, ladies. I haven't forgotten about you. But so what is the definition of bullying?
At the Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities, we think about it as something involving a power imbalance, so that there are varying levels of power at play. It can involve hurting or scaring or being mean to someone else. It can be physical, emotional, verbal. Avoidance is often a tool that's used in terms of bullying. And often it's something that's done on purpose, and it's done with some level of repetition. So there can be bullying that happens on a single occasion, but usually when we talk about that power imbalance, we're talking about it happening more than once and persistence, like what we heard about with your son.
Mm-hmm. Now, Karen, you live in that same area.
Yes.
And you had similar incidences that happened to your son. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Now, my son graduated out of the York County School Division in 2012. So his situation happened when a young man who was on the baseball team started bullying him, and he was the son of a long-term substitute there. And so how I originally heard about it was the assistant principal called me and told me that a fellow student had reported that my son was being bullied. And
so another student stepped up.
Yes, another student stepped up. And so when I spoke to that assistant principal who did talk to me about it over the phone, he told me that he would keep an eye out, and he started monitoring where my son would be. And also, I, of course, talked to him about it. My next door neighbor came and talked to me about it because her son also was in the same school district, a schoolmate, and it just got progressively worse. As a mother, I've always taught all my children, you do not hit first, but if you get hit, you have to defend yourself. Mm-hmm. So there came a time when the teasing got worse, cyberbullying was going on, and nobody was responding. It got to a point where the student shoved my son. My son punched him, pushed him back, and then there was a fight. So the altercation happened. Both students were suspended. My son was suspended because they said that he did not have the same level of response, which...
So he had a higher level of response than what he received.
Yes. Mm-hmm. The student who shoved him, pushed him, Joey could have pushed him, but he did not, because you have to recognize, as a mother, I'm telling him, you can't have the first punch. I don't know what this other student's mother is teaching him. Mm-hmm. And so that became one of my things. I wanted the school to tell me who I could talk to, because when you have somebody that's pointing in your face, that's joking on you, that's making you as miserable as they can possibly do each day, that child that's receiving that attention is getting wound up and wound up and wound up and wound up. And so the very moment that somebody puts that hand on a child, and it's the same person who continues to make that child's life miserable every day, when you touch that child, there's going to be a different response because there wasn't a different posture to begin with. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, there was a fight. My son ended up with, his face was really messed up. And so he continued to go to school after the suspension was over and continued to be ostracized, continued to be joked. They started threatening him on, they would text him and tell him to come back out and fight. And then the young man who did the situation, he also started laughing and teasing about it on Facebook. At one point,
so
he
you
told
had cyberbullying on top of physical.
Yes.
Bullying.
At one time, he told him, "Why don't you just solve all of our problems and just kill yourself?" And he also told him, "If you don't, I might just have to kill you." And so at that point, I did go down to the sheriff's department. I filed a report. Well, I wrote a report out, but I didn't file it because I wanted an opportunity to talk to the young person's parents. So we did meet. We spoke for 3 hours at a public restaurant. I also spoke to my senator at that time, John Miller. I spoke to everybody I could possibly speak to. However, the superintendent would not see me, nor would the Board of Education see me. They would not discuss it with me. The principal of the school said that there, in his estimation, was not reoccurring incidents, and that I had not reported it to an administrator. However, as I said, an administrator contacted me originally. When the threat came that of violence against my son, we could not go to school that morning until after school started because they wanted to change my son's classes. In the mediation agreement, which came from there, the mediation agreement that the school put together that we signed talked about the discussion of bullying, talked about Facebook, talked about fighting. However, when it came down to the time of me actually talking to try to get some resolution, to have a meaningful conversation, I was not allowed to sit at their table.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. Are you or someone you know been a victim of bullying, or are you a bullier? Did you play that role when you were in school, and if so, what made you do that? 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So, Dr. Duncan, what happens psychologically to someone when they face incidences like the two stories we've just heard?
There are a lot of things that happen psychologically, and the literature actually talks about three groups of people that are involved with bullying, and that would be the bully, that person who's perpetrating what is occurring, the person that's receiving it, getting bullied, but many times there are also observers who have psychological consequences as a result of witnessing bullying happening and things not being done about it or being done about it. So when a person is bullied, one of the most common responses is that they are depressed, that they become they begin to feel hopeless about their situation and like nothing can be done about it. Nothing that they can do will make it stop. Nothing that a parent does will make it stop. And that is what often leads to the level of hopelessness where people will attempt to take their lives. And we've seen that recently. We've seen that locally. We've seen it nationally, where children feel as though they have no resources, they have nothing that will make a difference, and that it would actually be better for them to be dead than to be here. There's also anger that comes about as a result of sometimes observing bullying, sometimes being bullied, and often those who have been bullied become those that bully. They will act out their feelings of aggression, of anger. So people also get angry. And then people also emotionally will experience anxiety, never knowing next where it's coming from, never knowing who to expect it from. Cyberbullying, never knowing if you look at your Facebook page, what might be there. And so there are a lot of negative emotional consequences that come about as a result of bullying.
Wow. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Brian joins us from Hampton. Hi, Brian. You're on the air.
Hello.
Hi. What's your question?
Yes, I would just like to comment. I want to apologize for, I feel sad for the two ladies that you have on your show. But I'd also like to say that I own a karate school in Hampton. I always have, at the beginning of school year, people coming to us and saying, hey, my child's getting bullied. What can you do to help? And, of course, karate is a good way to defend yourself. But, we'd like, it's not a take a couple lessons type thing and then you defend yourself. But it's really a self-motivating, confidence building, and a self-worth thing that's going to take some time so that those bullies say, hey, let's not mess with this guy, not because he knows something or how to defend himself, but you can tell that he is just strong from the inside out. That's what we try to portray. So my thing to parents is to be proactive in that, not reactive and wait for it to happen, but also to, get them in the team sport and get them into something like karate so they feel strong about themselves. And usually bullies don't look for people who are strong already on the inside. They're looking for that loner kid that has maybe one or two friends that are kind of like themselves.
Okay, Brian, our guests want to respond. I see you, Karen, shaking your head. Your son, though, actually was on the baseball team, right?
No.
Oh,
But my son
okay.
lifts weights. My son could have, if he had put his hand on him, he would have hurt him.
Got you. So your son was engaged in that way. Your son was on the football team.
My son was on the football team.
Okay.
I disagree with you. My son is very popular in that school. I can tell you of one incident. The year before, I went to visit him for lunch for his birthday. And as soon as I go in and I go in the cafeteria, everyone is like, "Hi, ZaKhari's mom." I felt like I was in a movie. You know how everybody just speaks? And I withdrew him early from school that day. And I'm walking with him through the hallway, and all the children are speaking, "Hi, happy birthday, ZaKhari. Happy birthday, ZaKhari." ZaKhari is well known. He's a people person. So I beg to differ with what you're saying.
Well, and Jonathan, actually, because some of the materials that I've read do fit what Brian was talking about in terms of some of the things they say are characteristic of children who are bullied. So it doesn't cover the gamut, but can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So there are certain tendencies of potentially students who are going to be bullied, but I think we spend far too much time focusing on what the bully should do to get out of the situation and far less time focusing on how we can activate those who are bystanders and how we need to address the culture that lets the bullies get away with their particular behavior. So certainly a student can work out or be in athletics or do other things like that. That doesn't mean they deserve to be bullied if they don't do those things. The bystanders in our work, really, we try to move them from being bystanders to being upstanders. So rather than standing by, how do you stand up in ways that are productive and helpful and educational, and then maybe provide allyship over a long period of time? But I think the biggest question for schools is what did we do to create a climate where the bully thought it was okay to act in that way? And what are the things that we need to do as a school, as educators, as administrators, to really figure out how do we address the bullying behavior, not figure out what the person who's being bullied needs to do to get out of that situation.
Got you. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Our phones are lit up, so clearly this is a topic that touches a lot of people. Fred joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Fred. You're on the air.
Yeah, hello.
Hi.
Hello. I just wanted to comment. These are sad cases, and unfortunately, I think parents need to do more. You can't handle every case like this. And superintendents in school, they don't want to listen to parents. But what they will listen to is when they get a call or a letter from an attorney. These parents should have had attorneys involved in these cases, and things would have gotten straight quickly.
Okay, Fred, thanks so much for that call. We appreciate that. Let's go to, because, each individual parent will decide, I would assume, on what they want to do in terms of handling their particular situation. But I want to go back to your point about how do we create a culture where bullying doesn't happen to begin with. I know that the VCIC has some programs that you all do. Can you talk to us about what you try to instill in those programs and how they work?
Yeah, we really help with both young people and with adults. We think a bottom-up and a top-down approach is what really will change the culture of a school. Putting up posters that say, "Be nice to each other, don't bully," really doesn't do it. It requires a level of relationships, I think, for students to be able to trust one another, for them to feel empowered to be able to resolve conflicts effectively and productively and to communicate effectively. One of the things we found is when we were doing this work several years ago and we started telling students, don't just be a bystander, be an upstander, that conflicts actually grew in the school because students were now jumping in and so we had to that was too general. We had to be specific. Here are ways to be an upstander that actually is effective and that's educational. Sometimes that involves speaking to the person who's the bully and using your influence to create change. Sometimes it's supporting the victim. Sometimes it's going to find an adult. Sometimes it's creating a diversion. There are lots of different things you can do, and we help students to think about role-playing and coming up with what they're comfortable doing. At the same time, there's work that needs to be done by adults in the buildings to figure out where are the unsupervised areas. So the school bus is a classic example where you have one person sitting in the front who's driving and needs to pay attention to the road, and a number of students who are doing all kinds of things that can't be supervised. And so there's a supervision question, there's a school climate and culture question. What do teachers do early on in the school year to create a welcoming climate where students trust that if they go to an adult, it'll be addressed effectively, that they trust one another, that there's a way to restore justice. Restorative justice and discipline practices are much more effective than suspending or expelling students. So there's a lot that needs to be done comprehensively. It's not just a check off the box a solution to this problem.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about bullying, particularly among young people, with Zettrona Powell and Karen Eure Wilson, both mothers of sons who've been bullied. Dr. Ernestine Duncan, chair of the psychology department at Norfolk State University, and Jonathan Zur, president and CEO of Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities. His organization works with schools to end bullying. Let's see. Abby joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Abby. You're on the air.
Hi. I just wanted to add, my daughter was bullied in her freshman year of high school, but I actually want to speak to the bullying as far as it has to start with teachers and administrators, meaning they can't be, I'll give you an example. When she was in 7th grade, one of her teachers told a boy to go outside of class because he was either goofing off or maybe he wasn't doing his work. So he stood outside the door, and then he asked my daughter after 5 minutes to go get him. And he said, Gabby, I want you to go get, Johnny, and tell him to come back in, but tell him he's stupid. And so the whole class laughed. And to me, that's someone in power, actually taking advantage of his power over someone who can't speak for himself. And, of course, my daughter didn't do that because I said, why not, Gab? And she said, because he's my friend. And I said, and you tell him that if he asks, that I didn't raise you that way. But do you see how the bullying, it spreads all through, but the kids don't take it seriously. There's no bullying zones because if they're not walking the talk. You talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. And I've seen friends who are teachers who've been bullied by their principal, that they can't speak up because they're in fear of their job. So I think the atmosphere has to be spread all throughout, and not just telling kids, don't bully one another.
Okay, Abby,
Teachers
thank you so much for your call. We appreciate that. And I hear what Abby's saying. I mean, it's a lot of this, because bullying happens in school a lot, I think a lot of people turn to the schools to fix it. But I guess my question and I'll go around the room, starting with you, Dr. Duncan, is what do we need to be doing? Parents, pastors, community, to try to make sure that bullying doesn't happen too?
Well, I think we can even just look at the presidential election and recognize how we are a society of bullying. And so
we had someone write in that very question, because from Steve Corneliuson, who's very well known on the peninsula, and he was asking the question about. He was saying that his wife is a teacher and she is worried about little boys watching Donald Trump and his behavior in terms of bullying.
Exactly right. And as the mother who just called in said, that there are teachers who are bullied by principals, and so it is systemic. We see it happening everywhere. And in our doing nothing about it, it's almost a passive acceptance of it. And so I think conversations like this are necessary, but not just here, at the school, in our homes, in our neighborhoods. We need to have the discussion about what kinds of behaviors are appropriate and what kind of behaviors are not appropriate. We're very lucky with these two young men that they had the relationship with their family members and with teachers, some teachers, that they were able to talk about what was going on, because they had a sense of, this is not right, it doesn't feel good to me, and I'm going to say something about it. But far too many times, those that are the survivors of being bullied, they don't feel like they have the voice to be able to say this is wrong and something about it should be done, and rather they accept it, they acquiesce to it, which sometimes gives the message to those to those who are bullying that it's okay to do that. So I think first we need to acknowledge that bullying is occurring at all levels, everywhere in our society, that when we don't address it, when we don't acknowledge it, identify it, we are passively accepting it. And so conversations need to begin where people understand that it is not acceptable. I would also add that it's a different world than it was when we used to say it was a rite of passage. Children today, students today, are also distracted by the pressures of grades, scores. And so these are other things that are leaving us really vulnerable to the thing that we may have been able to brush off our shoulder 20 years ago. It's just yet another thing. I don't have the Jordans. I don't have and those things combined leaves children very vulnerable. And I think we need to address that issue as well. With our students.
Karen, you're the president of the Hampton Roads Black Media Professionals, and I know that part of the organization has had, or the organization has had a lot of conversations about advocacy and about working in this arena. So from your perspective, what should we as a community be doing about this?
I believe as a community, we all have a part to play. Everybody can talk about, different strategies and plans, but unless you have people that will actually be committed and do something, have meaningful conversations, have meaningful resolutions, have follow-up and accountability, it's just a lot of talk. I understood what you read, the statement from the York County School Division. I had an opportunity to go when Zettrona spoke to the Board of Education. And I was struck by the number of sheriff representatives that were there at this particular meeting. I was struck by the orientation that was given as to the protocol for how that meeting would be conducted. I've been to different meetings, and I've never had or heard that same type of protocol when it was known that the issue that would be presented that night would be about racism, would be about bullying, that Zettrona would be there, her family, and the NAACP. So I saw a difference there. Also, when your school system is one of the major commodities in which people will locate by real estate, move to your area, how much conversation can there be if your priority might not be students first?
Okay. I hear your point. Jonathan, what should we be doing as a general community? Let's talk about parents from that perspective. Then what kind of conversations should we be having, and how young should we be starting?
I think we need to start as young as possible. There are a great number of children's books out there that you can be reading to 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds that are about how to get along, how not to leave people out. And you can do it in age-appropriate ways. When we get to elementary school ages, a lot of schools think about what are our school values or pillars, and they have conversations about respect. There are ways to do that build up into what ends up happening at the middle and high school level, where there are often bullying is linked to issues of bias or identity. So people will talk about skin tone or use hurtful language related to sexual orientation or gender, those types of things. But parents need to be involved in helping their students understand, or their children understand from young ages, how to interact with one another effectively, how to resolve conflicts peacefully. When you put hundreds of people in the same building, they're not always going to get along, and we can't expect them to. I think it's unrealistic. But they can have the skills to be able to communicate and resolve conflicts respectfully, rather than to be violent to one another, rather than to bully one another and leave folks out, and parents play a critical role in that.
Zettrona, what do you think in terms of what the community can do?
Well, I go back to it takes a village to raise a child. Back in the days, people in the neighborhood can go to, if they see someone's child doing wrong, they can chastise them and tell them, hey, don't do that. And, that worked. That seemed to work. Nowadays, parents are, you can't say anything to my child. When I asked to have a meeting with the young man's parents in ZaKhari, I was denied. They didn't want to have a meeting. How would this stop if you're not open to communication? And like Ms. Karen said, it's not all about talk. It's about putting your actions to work, putting up boards and signs and stuff saying, we're anti-bullying. That's not working at all. The children are going to the administrators, they're talking to them, and they're being brushed aside. I mean, I know grades and everything are important because I stay on my children about grades, and ZaKhari and the rest of my children have had immaculate grades ever since they've been in school. But if they would treat this bullying the way they treat the grades, I think it would have a bigger impact.
So pay more attention to what is going on. Our phones are lit up. Let's see. Mark joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Mark. You're on the air.
Yeah, good afternoon. Parent of 4, Norfolk Public Schools, and just a few quick points. One is for your guests who had the opportunity to file the complaint with the Sheriff's Department and did not. That was, I think, a gross negligent mistake. Number 2, for your guests who had the opportunity to sit at the table and advocate for her son ZaKhari and others, I think that was a mistake. Number 3 is what the caller called in, and he talked about litigation. These days, we're in a money society. Nothing changes until I hit you in the pocketbooks. And that means that through litigation, that means that the principal's job is at stake, which means that that's going to ripple to other principals. And then lastly, with my 4 children, I tell them like what we call bullying. And I take your guest's point. It's not right. But what it taught us growing up was that if you could zing at me, I zing at you. And what it did, it gave us the ability to be able to be more nimble and to be more mentally tough. And lastly, the parents. Now, the 2016 parenting is actually making our children softer. So what I do in my house, I teach my children that you have to be mentally tough. That is the key to victory, mental toughness.
Okay, Mark, thanks so much for your call. We'll let our panel respond. Mark talks about being mentally tough, but I just want to hear from you, Dr. Duncan, in terms of some of his other points.
I would probably need a little bit more clarity about what mentally tough really is. And I think that, this saying, unless you walked a mile in my shoes, it's really hard to weigh in on what other people should do. But I think that a lot of parents do everything that they can to make sure that their children are have a good self-esteem, feel good about themselves. But the world is cruel, and things that are said, things that are done, the isolation that many children face, it is dehumanizing. And it makes it very difficult for students to even sometimes want to go to school. So you see a high rate of students being absent from school, skipping school, because they just don't want to be there. Does it mean that they are mentally weak? No, not necessarily. But sometimes when the weight is too much, you just can't do what
because
people
sometimes
expect
you can fight back, or you can say something back, have another zing or whatever, or play the dozens or whatever, however you want to handle that, but it still may not stop, is your point, and so it just keeps piling on.
And in fact, it may make it even worse. And for many children who are bullied or who live in households where they see bullying occur or abuse occur, they are ready to retaliate in a way that most children may not be able to. And so we've heard that in some instances where this has been brought to people's attention, it actually exacerbated more bullying and more difficulty for students. So it's really a formula that is a case by case and needs to be tailored in each individual situation.
Karen, for clarification, you decided that you wanted to talk with the parents.
Yes, I talked to the parents
of the bully,
because that child had a mother and a father, and so, I know that they weren't anticipating that their child was going to school and causing problems. So I wanted to give them an opportunity to see the Facebook posts, because when I originally contacted them, she said, oh no, my son hasn't. And I said, would you allow me to show you the posts? And so after she saw them, she was mortified. And then we got together and we talked. Now, who I took to the table was, at that point, my ex-husband, who's my son's father, and he is attorney Eure Wilson. And so we were, I will say after that conversation, because we spent 3 hours talking to the parents, and at the end of that, he assured those parents, he said, under no circumstances do you want me to have to come back here if my child cannot walk down the halls like any other child, if my child has to worry about your son. And it was very clear that that would not happen anymore. Now, it did not happen with that student, but there were other students. They kind of see something, and sometimes they'll try to pick up where things have been left off. Other times he's been ostracized because, they kind of pick which student is the most popular or who they think is the one that they want to hang out with. And then it doesn't stop at high school. He actually, when we went to college, when he was standing in line for to get his package together, he got pulled out of line because on his file he said that he had been suspended. So we had to explain again. This is what happened.
So it just continues. It sticks with you. My producer is just telling me that people may not understand what "play the dozens" means. So it is an expression where one person will say one thing and you come back with a smart retort, and it goes back and forth. I guess that's the easiest way to explain what the dozens are. Let's see. Let's talk to Vanessa in Williamsburg. Hi, Vanessa. You're on the air.
Hi, how are y'all today?
Okay, how are you?
Doing well. So my thing is actually the worst place that I was ever bullied was actually in elementary school. And I had a lot of picking on me because my family didn't have money or I didn't have the right clothes, even in elementary school. What I've noticed growing up, obviously, I grew up. I did have those moments. The doctor is absolutely right. I was completely depressed. My parents didn't know why. There were times that I thought about, maybe it would be better off if I wasn't on Earth. And luckily I was strong enough that I could get past all of that and realize that, most bulliers are, they have troubles in their life, and this is how they focus their anger and whatnot. But working as a correctional officer in my past career, I noticed that a lot of I worked at a male prison, a lot of the men coming up were still acting exactly like bullies while incarcerated. And it got me thinking that we want to disrupt the victim's life. We want to change their classes and follow them around. And nobody seems to want to help the bully figure out what the problems are in their life so that they don't have to take it out on other human beings. And I think that, yes, we should help the victim 100%, but I think that we should also, believe it or not, help the bully, because there is something in that person that will stay with them until adulthood that needs to be helped now, while we're seeing it happen, while we have the writing, while we have the fact that they are, in fact, doing the bullying now.
Fantastic, Vanessa. Thank you so much for your call. I've got lots of nodding around the table, so I'm going to let our guests respond to that. Jonathan, go ahead.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot, not as much in Virginia, but in certain parts of the country, a movement towards restorative justice and restorative discipline. And really one of the key premises there is that a student bullies another student, kicking them out for 5 days from the building, expelling them, and then bringing them back in, hasn't done anything. But actually having the students sit down and have a conversation where the victim is able to talk about how she or he was wronged and the hurt that was caused, the bully's able to hear that and have some conversations around what made that person think it was okay to engage in that behavior, and where did it come from, and what can they do differently, and then for them to come to some agreement, and maybe even the whole class, if you have people who are bystanders or people who are watching it, you need to have the others involved as well. That is able to actually move that group forward, whereas just sending the student out, suspending for a few days or expelling doesn't really change the circumstance or the situation. So we absolutely need to be working not just on supporting the victim, but also addressing the bullying behaviors.
If you find out, Dr. Duncan, that your child is the bully, how do you address that? What do you need to say to your child? Believe it or not, we've got less than 5 minutes left in this show. This is amazing. But go ahead. What do you say to them so that you can try to change that behavior?
Again, it starts with the conversation, being willing to hear what they have to say, whether it be, I saw you and Daddy fighting last night, and so being willing to hear that and to accept whatever responsibility may be in that, to find out what, if they can identify for themselves and for you, what is at the core that is making them act in that way. Because as the previous caller said, many bullies have had a life where their bullying is a coping response. It's an attempt on their part to deal with something, feelings of inadequacy, anger, whatever it might be. And so to begin to get to the bottom of what is underlying your choice in this behavior, and to enact some consequences in place. But some of those consequences need to include some positive aspects about that person. We talk about positive psychology, and that is not just going to fix what's wrong, but to identify and to build and enhance what are that person's strengths. A bully is not all bad.
Exactly, and that's the one thing we need to remember. We've got about 3 minutes left. I know you had an event you wanted to tell us about if parents wanted to learn more about bullying, or anyone actually in the community.
I do. And there actually is an agency, Parents Against Bullying. I'm trying to find their information right now. I'm sorry. Okay. And they will be having an event this weekend. On Friday, they're having their 3rd annual Family Fun Day. It will be held at 249 Chamberlain Avenue in Hampton, Virginia. And I have a phone number if people want more information. Okay. And that number is 757-329-2859. And this agency is bringing awareness to communities about bullying and making it a conversation that the community can address. I think they're doing great work.
Thank you. That's Dr. Ernestine Duncan with Norfolk State University. Thanks so much for joining us. Karen, you have some things that are coming up or maybe going on?
Well, we actually are going to be having a town hall on bullying and racism in public schools, and we're looking forward to having that in September. Okay. More information will be coming out about that. Okay. And again, we need to have meaningful conversations and then meaningful action to follow.
Absolutely. That is Karen Eure Wilson, who is president of the Hampton Roads Black Media Professionals and the mother of a son who's in college now, but was bullied while he was in high school. Jonathan, you got about 15, 20 seconds.
Okay.
To wrap it up.
There's been a lot about attorneys, and certainly that can be a role that can be a resource. But I hope it doesn't have to get to that. There's a lot that can be done before we have to take the legal route in terms of helping schools to create inclusive environments, supporting those who are being victimized by bullying, and addressing some of those bullying behaviors with positive responses.
Okay, and that is Jonathan Zur, the president and CEO of the Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities. And Zettrona, you have the last word.
Well, I would just say parents, pay careful attention to your children. If you see that they're changing in mood, really pay attention, talk to them, have open communication, and just stay on it.
Fantastic. Thank you. And we wish you and ZaKhari and the rest of your children the very best of luck. And it's a serious subject, folks, so let's pay attention to our kids. And we will be right back.
Hello, my name is Robert Garland, resident choreographer for the Dance Theater of Harlem, and you're listening to Another View on WHRV 89.5 FM.
Welcome back, everyone. The world's first black classical ballet company will grace Hampton Roads with stellar performances this weekend. The Dance Theater of Harlem continues its long-standing relationship with the Virginia Arts Festival, with 2 performances at Chrysler Hall. Our Lisa Godley spoke to the company's resident choreographer about something new in this year's performance, the world premiere of a new ballet, coupled with a rarity, live music by the Virginia Symphony Orchestra.
The Dance Theater of Harlem's resident choreographer, Robert Garland, has spent the last few years traveling from New York to Hampton Roads, speaking to area students of all ages about the art of dance.
So I would come down with dancers and do educational activities with the great Christine Faust, who works at Virginia Arts Festival, putting on lecture demonstrations, giving all kinds of children an opportunity to see the art form that I work in and that I love. Because I often tell them that it's not so much that I want you to become a dancer, but just that you know what your options are. Maybe you're a dancer. Maybe you're a costume designer. Maybe you're a lighting designer. All these people play a part in putting together art. It's a cottage industry full of very exciting work for people.
Garland was a principal dancer with the Dance Theater of Harlem for many years and was named resident choreographer upon his retirement. So Garland was thrilled when asked to create a special ballet for the Virginia Arts Festival.
opening the program will be Brahms Variations. It's a very popular piece of music. And our founder, Arthur Mitchell, he was a very grand guy. Reminded me a lot of Louis XIV, the founder of ballet. He had this kind of grandness about him. So Arthur Mitchell was, for me, like my African-American Louis XIV, you know. And so the ballet, in part, has the kind of grandeur of the French court with a little bit of Harlem swag built in. So the combination has been very interesting, I have to say.
The Virginia Symphony Orchestra will provide live music for all but one piece of the program. That's when the rhythm changes a bit, when Garland features the music of James Brown and Aretha Franklin, a segment he calls The Turn.
The Turn I created a long time ago for Dance for Harlem's 30th anniversary, which is to the music of James Brown and Aretha Franklin, which of course is recorded music. I wanted to create a ballet that kind of honored these two legends of African-American musical history. Because at the time, the dancers that I was dealing with had no idea who they were. Their music was being used for advertising, for different things on television, and they never really got to hear the music in its original fashion, which was to be listened to.
While the company was founded 47 years ago, there was an 8-year period between 2004 and 2012 when there were no performances at all. Garland credits artistic director Virginia Johnson with bringing the company back. She brought in professional dancers so choreographers could create work that would eventually be used for the Dance Theater of Harlem company. During that time, Garland worked several times with one now very recognizable name.
The dancer that I used, who actually was not as well known as she is now, was Misty Copeland.
Copeland made history in June of last year when she became the first African-American woman to be promoted to principal dancer with the American Ballet Theater.
Just last November, I created work for her honoring Wynton Marsalis in Philadelphia.
But this weekend, Robert Garland and the Dance Theater of Harlem will be concentrating on providing a rich, full, and unforgettable experience for audiences here in Hampton Roads. For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
And the Dance Theater of Harlem will perform on Saturday, May 14th, that's tomorrow, at 8 p.m., and Sunday, May 15th at 3 p.m. Thank you so much for joining us for Another View today. We shared some critical information on ways to keep our children safe. And if you'd like to hear it again or share it with a friend, download the podcast at anotherviewradio.org or go to your app store and download the brand new WHRO Media app. That way you can listen to Another View live on your smartphone or tablet or catch the podcast at any time. We're also on Facebook, so like us, and I'm on Twitter at Barbara Ham Lee. Next week, it's Another View on health, and we're going to talk about health disparities because of, quote, the skin I'm in. That's the name of a new documentary that is being produced by Another View's roundtable pundit, Will Leviste, and it is all about the disparity in health issues that particularly affect African Americans. So you want to stay tuned for that next week. And don't forget that tomorrow at Baroud Park, there will be the what is the name of the event? There it is. Royalty Radio Come Together Day. It's at 11 a.m. at Baroud Park in Norfolk. Bring your children out. Come on out and have a great time participating and fighting against gun violence. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Victor Bowen is our audio engineer. And Carla Johnson, thanks Carla, answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Make it a fantastic weekend, everyone. And let's get together again next Friday at noon for Another View.